Aside of the TV movie, Doctor Who had been off the air for 16 years since Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred walked off at the end of Survival. Doctor Who was a British institution, having been on the air for 26 years, but dangling on the edge of cancellation in the latter half of the 80s until it left screens seemingly to never return. While the TV movie had raised hopes, the fears that many had seemed justified as it struggled to find a satisfying balance that led to such weird things as the Doctor supposedly being half human and the Dalek's voiceover cameo that sounded like Elmo having sex with a fax machine. So when the series was announced to be returning once again to screens in 2005, there was the same excitement and nervousness. Would the same thing happen again? Would the show need to become unrecognizable to be sustainable? Or would it wind up being so mired in its own continuity that it would be impenetrable? Well, while the show certainly isn't flawless, it did manage to maintain enough respect for the old without being kitsch. And while the idea of companions and romance can be a sore point for some of the ideas, like exploring how this traveling would affect the families of companions, injected a sense of realism into the series for a modern audience. But for New Who to survive, it needed to hit hard with its premiere, which is where we're going to be going today with Rose. This premiere episode kicks off with what at first seems an odd choice, given that this is the return of a cultural institution, and it starts with a montage of the day of the life of Rose Tyler, getting up in her pink room for work, heading to work, spending lunch with her boyfriend, going back to work. It shows us that she leads an ordinary life, but what is a nice touch is that she isn't unhappy with it. It would have been cheap to show Rose stuck in what she felt was a boring existence, so that traveling with a doctor would have been the obvious escape. But what we instead see is that she's like most of us. Probably not ecstatic about how her life is going, but not depressed about it either. That all in all it ranks on the good side rather than the bad side. But it is ordinary, and by showing that we see Rose stepping into the doctor's world, not because it's what she wanted, but because it's something she slowly discovers that she would have wanted if it had ever occurred to her. So Rose winds up with the job of giving some money to Wilson. I don't know if there's a difference in terms between the UK and the US, but in America, the CEO is the chief executive officer for the corporation, so an eyebrow gets raised as she visits the CEO in the basement, until it's later revealed it's a term for some kind of an electrician. It seemed, until then that the store was on some pretty hard times if the guy running the place had to have an office next to the boiler room. Anyway, Rose eventually searches for Wilson in a room full of mannequins, which comes to life and it comes after her. Figuring out they're just a bunch of students pulling a prank on her, she doesn't run until they have her cornered. But luckily,
Rob.
There's a man with a plan. The guys chasing the Doctor and Rose are Autons, and they're the only villains to appear in more than one story introducing us to a new Doctor, unless you count the Master for appearing in the TV movie. The Autons were introduced in the third Doctor's premiere, Spearhead from Space, and made only one other appearance in the classic show the following year in Terror of the Autons, which actually introduced us to the Master, so I guess these guys like to help Time Lords make their entrances. The Autons, as the Doctor quickly explains, are living plastic creatures, given this life by a signal, but luckily he has a way to block that signal. Unluckily, it involves a bomb. Uh-oh. I suppose the only thing we can do now is shut down Twitter and Facebook to make sure this kind of thing never happens again. Rose winds up going from the explosion to being dropped back into her ordinary life, with her mom going on with her friends about it and her boyfriend, once he's sure she's okay and doesn't need emotional support from him. He's not a jerk or anything. Just wanted to run off and go catch a match and do stupid things with the mannequin arm. Now with no work and a nagging mom, Rose sees the return of the Doctor as just another nuisance. After Jackie fails to seduce him, he starts rummaging around the place before checking a mirror, raising the question of whether or not he is just regenerated, and if so, has he just come from the horrible experience of ending the last great time war, of forever burdening his soul with guilt over the necessary destruction of two races to avoid the destruction of the universe? Is he fresh from that grief-filled event right now? Or did you just have really long hair and had a haircut?
Oh, could have been worse. Look at the ears.
It can really go either way. He came to Rose's apartment because he tracked the signal here, the one coming off of this arm. But Rose thinks he's just here to act like an idiot like her boyfriend, until the arm tries pulling her face off. Luckily, he's still got the sonic screwdriver from the TV movie, and so he can disable it. But she really wants to know what she's dealing with now.
Who are you?
Told you, the doctor.
Yeah, but Doctor what?
Just the doctor.
The Doctor.
Hello.
I think the reason that he seems like he's clowning around is, well, because he is clowning around. How far into this incarnation is we really can't say, but after all that Time War stuff, just sorting out a disembodied hand and a few mannequins has really got to be a refreshing break for him. Almost something for him to be as nostalgic for as the fans are. All that horror on an incomprehensible scale. Now he's just handling little stuff, like a few Autons wanting to take over the Earth. He can almost pretend that all that other stuff was a bad dream. Just him saving one little planet from an old enemy like he always does.
And the entire planet is hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and I can feel it.
Yeah, I know. I've had a few hangovers myself that felt exactly the same.
We're falling through space, you and me. Clinging to the skin of this tiny little world, and if we let go... That's who I am.
Care for a jelly baby? That's not enough, and eventually Rose drafts her boyfriend into helping her find out more, searching the net for info on this mysterious doctor, until she comes across some internet loon, as Mickey's quick to point out, and even his kids can see.
Dad! It's one of your nutters!
Poor people, having to put up with this hobby taking over. Get out! I told you I am not playing, I am working! Now get out! Sorry about that. Anyway, he's got images of the same man going back over a century, which convinces Rose that he really is an internet loon.